Of course not. There's no press release. I mean, that's if you go down the embargo and the route of you hire a PR firm, you send them the release, they try to pitch a bunch of people on it, but then you kind of have someone else pitching your story. It's much more energetic if it's, hey, I'm some 18-year-old sitting in your San Francisco office showing you a Google Glass app that I predict will change the world. Like, that's what they're looking for. If they see a press release, it's like, oh, that's a press release. Somebody is asking for press, as opposed to, here's some like interesting kid doing me the favor of sharing an interesting story.
So at Arctos, we have never really written a press release. The closest we've gotten was maybe saying a thank you on Facebook or retweeting on Twitter.
The time to reach out to the press is if you have a reason to reach out to the press. Well, I guess two things need to come together. The first one is you need to have news to tell. But you can sometimes kind of construct news, though that makes it harder. It's better if you have news to tell. And the second is, you have a goal for why you want PR. You have a goal for who you want to talk to and what you want to achieve in getting to them. And PR is a means to get to them. Then at that stage, you'll know. It's like when there's multiple times for that. If you found product market fit and your product works, and now it's about reaching more customers, that's an excellent time to do PR. If you raised a round and you're looking to hire more people and ramp up your effort, then that's an excellent time to do PR, probably with a journal that you think the kind of people that you would like to hire would be reading. Typically, it's a good idea to hit something out with a customer lined up to say, to back up the story and say, yeah, we have a commercial use case for this, especially if you're talking about an enterprise product.
The optimal time for reaching out to the press for us right now, after the one about us leaving Stanford and starting our company, is probably going to be the next time that we can tell them we have something to show. So when we have probably a beta product, we're going to reach out to the press and do a piece on what our technology actually is and what it looks like. One of the big things that these media companies are interested in when launching stories, especially about early stage companies, is where the company came from. So in both of the titles, they mention the fact that there's a college student leaving to start a company. And in the Wired article especially, they talk about how 2 Stanford students are leaving college. And so that creates a lot of buzz for them because it's a topic of interest. At the same time, one of the things that they're interested in hearing from us is why at our young age we chose to do so. And then the third thing that they're most interested in is probably just what new insights we have and what we actually plan to bring to the table.
We were in a lucky position for PR for a number of reasons. We had no goal of creating this much buzz. We did because we basically jumped onto a rolling train. Yeah, it's of course, people, journalists, VCs look for patterns. And one of those patterns happens to be, 18-year-old Stanford kid does blah, blah, blah. So we fit that. The other pattern is new Google Glass app does blah, blah, blah. So we fit that one. And so, I would argue if you fit at least 2 of these patterns very well, that makes everything else very easy. I did not craft my pitch to Wired. It was, I just had a demo. That was all. I had the demo. I had already explained the purpose of what I was doing enough times before I ever talked to any reporter that by that point I pretty much had it down. And then I was just presenting them with the project that that we wanted to do, and then journalists kind of jump at it and ask questions, and it turns into a conversation from there. It's not like you stand there with a PowerPoint and like you click it through and you say, this is my company and this is our team and this is our, it's more like, here's a really cool product and I'm really passionate about this, and that's why I think it'll change the world. The same thing that if your classmate asked you what you were doing and why you were doing it, you would tell them, because that's who's eventually going to read these things.
is that we try to control the messaging with a reporter, especially because sometimes it can have a life of its own, is to have talks with them after the first interview, to really just drive home particular points that we care about, as well as just ask them very broadly what they're planning on making the article about. A lot of times reporters are willing to work with us, especially because they're writing a feature story as opposed to a headline news. Over time, that probably won't be the case, and they'll be writing stories on their own accord as opposed to what we would like for us to have a beneficial experience. But in the beginning, especially when we're trying to brand ourselves, we try to influence them as much as possible to put us in good light and also in the light that we want to be seen.
We reached out to them. I mean, it was so we knew we wanted to get something out there. Basically, one of our customers was going to reveal themselves the week after, and we didn't want the first word out there, I guess, to be something from a customer. We wanted to control the message. So we went and reached out to Wired, and we kind of had, I guess, two options. We were either going to go with an embargo and basically get, the TechCrunch, the Next Web, and kind of those guys onto one page, or we thought there was an opportunity to do one exclusive with somebody who would kind of do more towards our space. Somebody like Wired who did a bunch of tech stuff. So I got an introduction to the reporter, went and told him what we were doing, told him that our customer's going to hit out a story on Monday, and I met with him on a Thursday. So kind of tried to create a pressure of, okay, there's 3 days left. You got the weekend. It has to be out Monday to beat everyone else to the news. And he jumped at it.
One of the benefits that we've seen about releasing this to the press is not only that we've attracted possible clients, but more so that we've attracted possible recruitments. So one thing that Buzz does really well for us is that it tells potential employees that we're serious, and that even though we're an early stage company and we're growing slowly and that we don't have funding, this is a very important place. And even though we're young and we're very hungry for getting bigger, it's a good place for them to come even if they're not getting paid, and maybe they'll only get equity. In the entire media storm of the past week that we've had, a lot of people have reached out to us. Some of which have been potential investors, whether it's angel investors or people who work at a venture firm who want to just have a meeting. At the same time, we've had people send their resumes, people actually calling to see if we needed PR help, and in some cases, just people giving us congratulations, others giving us paragraphs worth of advice, and some people just wanting to give us support for our decision to leave college because they agree with our statements.
When people hear about you doing cool stuff, they reach out to you, and they, if they think what you're doing is interesting, they want even more people to hear about it. And it's a chain of events. People at conferences reach out to you, other journalists reach out to you, investors reach out to you, friends who you haven't talked to in 5 years reach out to you, friends who really aren't your friends and now think what you're doing is really interesting reach out to you. And you got to be careful to determine where to spend your time. The Wired article, in some sense, framed the broad technology that we were developing, but it also mentioned a very specific use case. And it was a use case that actually turned out to be, at the time, more of a side project for us than anything else. Like, we wanted to know whether that was something to go after and like whether people were interested in this at all. So we built a prototype. And obviously, you have the capacity to test it in your own lab. But if you're trying to reach a specific audience, a bunch of people with high-functioning autism, that's hard to do on your own. And for that and for consumer products, I guess, press is a great way to alpha test your hypothesis. There are typically setbacks to PR. I think the biggest one is that people frame you in a box and they sort of put you on a watch list, but they now get this idea of what it is you're working on, and it's usually that specific thing. Like, they associate it with the article. They also sometimes assume that if you're out there talking about something that you plan to fully develop, that it's done and finished. right? So in our case, yeah, we built a prototype for a Google Glass app that could help kids with autism recognize facial expressions. Didn't mean it was clinically tested and approved. It's just a prototype, but it now meant that, there's a lot of people who expect to buy this at the store tomorrow, which is great in a way because it puts some pressure on you to make it work. But it obviously also comes with a time commitment of kind of having to deal with all of that inbound. So new point to my previous point, which is the fact that people frame you into this is, I think that's much more prevalent in cultures other than Silicon Valley. So out here it's Hollywood, right? Like here you can launch an article about this Y Combinator thing you're doing on one day on TechCrunch, and if people don't subscribe to your mailing list, then a week later in the exact same publication you talk about something completely different, and people go, yay, cool, new startup. In countries like Germany, you're held accountable to what you're saying, and I think globally that's much more true. It takes a lot longer for that image to potentially get out of people's heads if you would want it to. So it ties you down in a way.
So one of the problems that Klinkle had was that they created so much buzz in the Valley that everyone was expecting them to come out with a product very quickly. And they created that buzz so early on that the expectation from the Valley was not only to make a great product quickly, but to make it even better than expected. So over time, they increased the pressure on themselves, and it was very hard to perform under that pressure. And one of the things that does to a small company like that is it makes you grow faster than you can. I don't know particularly Klinkle's internal problems, but I do know to the outside world it looks as if they haven't created anything, even if they are working hard, only because the media has turned it that way. And so that's definitely a negative effect of having too much PR too early. With Arctos, our PR movement hasn't really been in tandem with using a firm. Instead, we've actually used a lot of our resources in our network, asking them questions about how to approach PR, as well as things just like reading books by marketing professors and those who have been involved in PR in the past, just learning from others' experiences, and then applying that knowledge to our own. So, for example, I, at Arctos, head up PR, and a lot of what we've done has been just based on things that I've read and advice that I've gotten from people that I've talked to. So one book that has been really influential to how I've approached PR is Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath. The book is very much about marketing and about branding an idea, and the important concept behind it is to really understand what the essentials of an idea are and how to make them sticky. And the same is true for PR. You need to take the most important parts of what you're talking about and release that to the public and make sure that that part of the idea sticks. So the resources that I've used for PR have helped me a lot, mostly because they give me perspective and context. One of the problems that I've had in the past, especially with reaching out, is that I wouldn't really know exactly the right things to say or what they're looking for. And so as I learn more about marketing and PR, I can actually start to tailor reaching out to press and different media outlets about not what I think is important, but what I think will make a good story for them. We didn't use a PR firm for two reasons. One, because it's expensive and we're a very early stage startup and we really don't have the funds to pay for that. And second of all, because we're an early stage startup, publicity like we have is not actually necessary. Like creating the buzz is nice, but if we didn't have the PR, we would still be moving along at the same pace. The PR is more of a factor of the fact that personally I've had a lot of publicity for things I've done in the past, and so it was easy to reach out to people who were willing to write a report simply as a continuation of the story on me.
No, never. We never use an agency for PR. The way I think about PR, so first answer is because of course we couldn't afford an agency. The more involved answer is, the way I like to think about PR is, it shouldn't be a priority for anyone, ever. Like you need to have a goal to do it if you want to do it. You need to sort of have something ready that you want to test, or you need to be looking to recruit people. You need to be looking to sort of get customer interest or things like that. That's what PR is really great for. It's a horrible thing to do if you just kind of do it because everyone else does it out here. Like that's just a big waste of time. With an agency, you sort of have the we weren't ready for that step because we weren't big enough. But with an agency, you kind of have this scheme A of somebody else essentially trying to convey a message in a very structured way, who knows a bunch of reporters and is going to go pitch them, as opposed to something that actually seems like a quirky, authentic story to a journalist, which is much more interesting to them and should be perhaps much more interesting to you because you're the one who wants to convey a certain message. You want to test a certain thing. I mean, that's the reason that, like, in the early stages of a startup, if your goal is to do customer development, you're the one who goes to meet with the customers. You don't hire, an agency to do so. You go meet with the customers, first of all, because you would like their feedback, but also because you're the one who can best demo your product. You're the one who can best, articulate what you want to say. And there's already one layer of indirection there. There's already the journalist who's going to write it up eventually. Why add another layer? Yeah, I think it was the first, but I think it was just something that was in the back of my head. So I think it's good to be aware of your network generally. It's good to be aware of where your friends are, who they know, who you've helped out, who would be likely to help you out. And then when you need it, that awareness kicks in, and you know who to go to. Yeah, I got an introduction through Steve Capps, a good friend of mine. So somebody the guy had written about before. So somebody he had just interviewed 2 weeks ago. And I said, "Oh, you were in Wired. Can you put me in touch with a reporter?" I said, "Sure." And then the reporter, of course, back-channeled to him because he knew a lot about my biography, asking, about me. Going through someone like Steve Capps is that's the natural way I would approach anyone if I can, is for an introduction. I think that's the best way to get into PR, because he was somebody that he had written about before, so he probably he was highly regarded by the reporter. To create the time pressure, it just seems like they want to tell news. And in classical journalism, one of the things that a lot of magazines, even online publications, are still run essentially like a newspaper. Many people don't realize that, but it's still 6:30 a.m. the story hits, and so therefore they were on a schedule and they had to get into this day or that day, and the guy was only going to publish to his own section, so he needed some incentive to write about it.
So when I was in high school, I worked on research in the field of quantum physics, and with that research I went to a lot of science fairs and different competitions, and due to some of my successes, first Caitlin Gibson reached out to me to write a story on one of the competitions that I did very well at, and with that I got to know her. And then later on at another competition, I started talking with Kate Metz at Wired, and he wrote an article on that. And over time, I've just maintained a relationship with both of them. And so now, with the company that I started, they've been very helpful in getting our first stories out. So for publicity, the first person I approached was Caitlin Gibson. When we were about to launch our website, I went and talked to her and just updated her with what I was doing with my life and about the company. And she offered to write an article and a story about it. And with that, we basically went forward in interviews with her, and that's where the first article came from in the Washington Post. After that, I talked to Cade Metz at Wired and forwarded him the article from the Washington Post, and then he wanted to know more about the technology because the first article was more about us as people. And he took that and interviewed us, and that's where the article in Wired came from.